Welcome to Fractional Futures, the essential podcast for CEOs, investors, and senior marketing executives looking to unlock the power of fractional marketing leadership. I'm Paul Mills, your guide on this journey, where me and my special guests uncover how this innovative leadership model is reshaping the business landscape. Whether you're a business leader looking to build a competitive advantage, an investor seeking to enhance the value of your portfolio, or a senior marketing executive considering a fractional career, this podcast is for you. We'll share expert insights, provide actionable strategies, and explore real-world success stories to help you leverage fractional marketing leadership for maximum impact. Tune into Fractional Futures and discover how to revolutionize your business and career. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Fractional Futures, where I'm joined by Dan Gwalter, an executive coach and founder of No Nonsense Leadership. Hi, Dan. How are you?
Hey, buddy. Yeah, all good. Still here. Enjoying the weather.
Enjoying the heat.
I'm one of those people. I'm the least British among us. I don't complain about weather. With horses and kids, we spend a lot of our time outdoors, and it's either wet and muddy or cold, wet and muddy. So when the weather's like this, I'm quietly grateful, if I'm honest.
Yeah, there's no such thing as bad weather. It's just bad clothing, isn't it? So for those of you tuning in this episode, we're going to be exploring the strategies fractional CMOs can adopt to grow their portfolio. So we'll be covering things like how to leverage your networks and referral mechanisms, how to build effective thought leadership, and how to manage multiple clients without compromising on service quality. So Dan, for marketing professionals considering the switch from an in-house corporate role to a fractional role, getting client traction is the first hurdle. And I think we discussed that quite comprehensively in episode 6. The next big hurdle to overcome is expanding your portfolio, making sure you've got that sustainable revenue to pay for the mortgage, pay for the kids to go to school, the cars, the holidays, all that kind of stuff. So looking at this from a helicopter point of view, one would naturally assume that particularly for fractional marketers of all people should know how to go about growing a client portfolio. But it's a different skill to winning your own business than it is managing a marketing function to win business for your employer. So from your coaching perspective, Dan, how should a fractional executive grow their client portfolio?
All right, let's be honest, this is a huge topic. And I think to set the frame, over the last year, I reckon I've probably spoken to somewhere close to 500 fractional consultants. And without any shadow of a doubt, the bit that they all cite as their primary struggle, forget about, how do I find clients? The bit that they cite as their primary struggle is business development. And zoning more into that, it's continuing business development alongside maybe the delivery or the execution for one client, because we get busy. When you don't have any clients, business development is straightforward. It's easy. It's all you do. Once you've got a client, your time is split between servicing, supporting, nurturing that client and retaining them, as well as trying to do your business development to increase the size of your portfolio. So I think the challenge is quite obvious. My starting point for that, I can tell you the bad outcome. If you don't do the business development yourself, your business will fail. It's the one area that you could outsource, but you shouldn't. You really shouldn't, because as a fractional, the thing that you are selling is you. And the best person to do that, ironically, is also you. So you're gonna have to get burnt a little bit in order to make this work. As advice, I would advocate dedicating a healthy amount of time each week to ongoing business development. And this, to a certain extent, I guess, this sort of comes back to why I talk a lot about not pricing per hour. So if you think about it, and you're going to have to squint a little bit to see the logic, if you price per hour, then most people will benchmark you on a 37.5 hour type week. And so in order to in order to overcome the price objection, you have to lower your rate in order to seem comparable. But what you're not factoring into that is that you're never going to work a 37.5-hour week for the client, because you've got to allocate a significant portion of your time to other activities, such as nurturing the existing pipeline, building the pipeline, raising brand and profile and awareness, all of those engagement things that you need to do. So if I look at my fractional consulting business, I reckon, and I'm pretty polished, I've been doing this 12 plus years, I reckon I still spend 30% of my time doing business development, which only leaves 70% of my time for client work if I wanted to work 100%, which, let's be honest, between you and me, we became fractional because we didn't want to work 100% at the time. So let's round it down. 50% of your time is the amount of time you want to be working. 30% of your time is the amount of time you'll be doing business development, and the 20% is slack that you can do with whatever you please. In my instance, ride horses, look after kids, cram everything else in. I don't know. What's your feelings on it?
You're totally right. And I launched VCMO last year, so about 12, 13 months old now, and pretty much all of my time has been going into VCMO. So my percentages are different. For me at the moment, it's about 60% building the business, building the brands, doing these podcasts, building all the assets and collateral I need to create that awareness. The rest of the time is client delivery. There'll be people listening to this who they've been very senior marketing executives, CEOs, directors. They've been bitten by the bug of this fractional career because they think I only work 2 or 3 days a month. I can have a pretty high income, do all the things that I love doing, better work-life balance. As a senior exec coming from that corporate role, you would have had team members. You'd have been managing team to do all of the grunt work, the content strategy, the podcasts, the LinkedIn, building blogs, writing blogs. You've got to start doing that yourself now, because you won't have a team to do this once you leave your corporate role. And if you're a person and you don't want to do LinkedIn every day, or if you don't like thinking about what blog am I going to write about this week, you're going to struggle. So when you're coaching executives, how do you prepare them for this? You've got to get your hands dirty to be successful.
Ironically, in my, I guess we'll call it a sales process, right? So I obviously work with aspiring fractional consultants in the context of coaching. I also work with fractional consultants that just aren't quite hitting the level they want to hit. But I do qualify those. I go through quite a robust qualification process. And the beginning of that is, are you ready for that mindset change? The biggest mindset change of all, which is you're no longer an employee. You don't have a team of people. You don't have a PA. You probably don't have a PA. I have met a few that actually did. But generally speaking, regardless of the job titles, let's use the CMO as an example. Yes, you're a CMO by trade, but when you become a fractional CMO, you're also the finance director, the sales director. You're also the chief technology officer. You're also the operations guy. You're the service delivery guy, and you're the customer success manager. And you actually do have to get your hands dirty in order to make a success of that. Now, that sounds pretty terrifying, right? For most people that I've spoken to, they're mature enough to acknowledge the things that they don't know. And therefore the big overwhelming concern is, what's my ramp up time look like? How long is it going to take me to get good enough at this? And that's the key point, is good enough to make it successful. And in my opinion, this is certainly where the coaching has a huge benefit. In my opinion, if you do it on your own and you try and learn all of those disciplines, and if I just take it at that level, it will probably take you a year to get up and running and established. That's on the proviso that you do it in the right order, because there is an order of events that gets you there quicker. Once you've established it, though, once you've got the right skills and you're doing the right things, then really that next step is, well, how do I industrialize it? I do not advocate that you sit there and spend 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day writing content on LinkedIn. In fact, there are much more lucrative ways to spend your day than burying yourself in a professional networking platform, writing content that 20% of the market sees. So really, it's about industrializing the things that can be industrialized, streamlining those processes, getting it down to a point where, if I take my own example, yes, it looks like I post on LinkedIn every single day and sometimes twice a day. But I can tell you categorically, it takes me less than 3 hours a week total to write all of my content for LinkedIn, because I've got a process, I have a content strategy, I have a method of doing that. My focus, therefore, turns to the engagement side of the conversation, talking to people within the platform, both in comments and direct messages, email marketing, plus all of the meetings and the discoveries and the calls that I undertake. So really, that's the headline for people coming into this market: is you have to want to get your hands dirty. If you fundamentally don't want to do that, then I strongly recommend that you stay in the employed world, where recruiters do your business development for you. If you do want to get your hands dirty, but you're nervous that you don't have the skills, or you don't know where to start, or you don't know how to make sense of that big picture, then find yourself a coach that can actually talk you through that. Even better, come and talk to me and I will take you through it end to end and show you exactly how to set up that business model.
That's good advice. And I think there's been several, since I've been doing this, I've spoken to hundreds of fractionals, both early, newbies, people who've just literally, they left their role a few weeks ago and they're now putting themselves out there as a fractional CMO. I've also spoken to fractional CMOs who've been doing it a few years, and they get to that point where they've just had enough of getting their hands dirty, because what they're doing, they think they're doing the right things, but actually they're doing it in the wrong way. They're rowing in the wrong direction. And there will come a point where you'll get so frustrated and downhearted on this that your mindset suddenly switches to, actually, that 6-figure salary in that corporate role actually sounds quite appealing now. Maybe what I'll do is go and have that conversation with a recruitment person and just put my CV out there again. Maybe this isn't for me after all. So how do you keep people's mindset positive on this? If they're getting to that crossroads where they think, actually, do I keep slogging this and hope time will prevail and the clients will come, or it's actually time to give up this fractional malarkey, I should go back to being an in-house executive? When do you decide that point?
It's such a nuanced topic. So in the last couple of years, I've met so many people that jumped into fractional without really thinking it through, started creating content because that's what they could see other people doing, and then locked themselves into that lane without getting any results. And I always feel horrible when I have those conversations, because my logic is, if you've done the same thing for 3 months and nothing has happened, what makes you believe that in month 4 there's going to be a different outcome? It's obvious when you say it like that. I absolutely attest that nobody jumps into the market and gets success immediately. Not by process. They may by luck or by referral. So for me, when I speak to those people that have been doing this for a period of time and they're burning out, they're running out of capital, and they're considering going back to an employed, my best route for them is to show them some of the things that aren't working. So maybe I'll do some of the things I've done in the past. Maybe I'll do a quick profile diagnostic where I'll record a loom of their profile and show them why their profile isn't performing. Or I'll take a look at a month's worth of content that's been created and highlight, why that type of content doesn't necessarily yield the result that you're looking for. Maybe you're talking directly to peers. Maybe you're using the wrong language. Maybe you're stuck in that nurturing zone and you're never actually telling the market what it is you want. Or maybe I'll look at the quality of the offer that they're putting out there to the market and then help them understand what the likely objection points are, and understand their sales process to understand whether they're actually getting an opportunity to respond to those objections, or whether they're They're selling it all out there in public, and therefore the objections are happening silently, so they never actually see them. So there's a lot of things that I can do to help people along in that journey, but I have met a number of people that, they've already gone too far before I get anywhere near them, and therefore their immediate need is, I need to generate revenue. And if that's the case, if you need to generate revenue in the next 4 weeks, then the bad news is even the employed market can't help you, because you have to work 4 weeks before a payday and you've got to interview, and that can take 2 or 3 months. So it's, for me, my best advice is, if it doesn't feel right, if you don't feel like you're making progress or you're just not sure, please don't sit in an echo chamber on your own, wondering, reading everybody else that says they're successful, or reading all of this content, or following guides. Actually find somebody that is a couple of steps ahead, that has done it, and pair up, buddy up, form a relationship. They will give you more insight and more guidance than anybody else.
That's totally right. And I think the good analogy is, if you're a person and you want to go and run a marathon, you don't do it on your own. Yes, you can go to YouTube. You need a proper coach, don't you? Because if you try it yourself without any expert coaching, you're going to get injured. You're not going to be able to complete a marathon. I would say, particularly in this domain of marketing services, because it's not like being a bricklayer or a plumber or a sparky, where it's quite a tangible service that you deliver. It's quite quick. It's a short buy-in time. There's not a big consideration. But I think in professional services, it's a completely different ball game. You've got to build that credibility. You've got to build that trust. It's a long-term game. And unless serendipity is in your favor, like someone has given you an instant referral and they're willing to buy straight away, a lot of people who are successful in this, it's serendipity that drives their success. So I personally, I would say anyone who is started thinking about getting into this fractional world, get coaching first, speak to coaches first before getting your fingers burnt, because the last thing you want to do is have that self-doubt in your own capabilities, because if you do this and you fail, that's going to leave a lasting impression on you, because you've told the world, I'm now doing this. And reputationally, you want to think about what that impact might be. If you go into this fractional world 6 months, 12 months down the line, if you've not won any clients, if you've not got anywhere, you're kind of putting the spotlight very much on you and your expertise, and you want to mitigate that. So I'd always say, get coaching in the earliest stages as you can. It pays dividends.
Yeah, look, I'm always going to advocate on the side of coaches for obvious reasons, and I make no bones about that. The way I would position this is that the number of different topics and the number of combinations that you could apply is immense. From going from zero to running a fractional business, there are so many variables and there are so many ways that they could come together, which means there's a lot of ways that it can come together wrong. And there's a lot fewer ways that it can come together right, unfortunately. The biggest mistake I see is not getting those foundation things in place first. When you're coming into the market as a fractional consultant, starting at the very, very beginning, who is your ideal customer, in what industry, at what stage of growth, and how do you help them? If you don't have that absolutely nailed to the floor, then everything else becomes irrelevant. It doesn't matter how great your content is. I see specifically marketeers, and I don't wish to suggest that they all use crayons and they all make things look pretty, because that would get me into a lot of trouble. But I've met a lot of marketeers that are very good at producing high quality content. But if you haven't done the niche and the ICP work, it's irrelevant. It doesn't do anything. By the same virtue, you've got to understand the purpose of your content. Your content is there to raise awareness about who you are and what you do, but primarily to cause an action. And that action, more often than not, will be, go and look at my profile, because you're not an employee anymore. Your profile shouldn't be a CV. It should be a landing page for your business. And at which point, if your profile isn't behaving, if it isn't performing, if it isn't delivering its true purpose, then your great content is simply pushing people towards a profile that's a little bit rubbish, which means they'll immediately disappear anyway. So you end up with what I refer to as a leaky funnel. Your content is performing, but the next stage down, that bit where you want people to transition into a conversation or a meeting, it's not happening. And so I've kind of got to a point now where I talk to a lot of people, I ask them what their problems are, and I can normally take a fairly educated guess what the underlying problem is going to be based on what the symptoms are that they're telling me. So as an example, I speak to people and they say, I've reached out to 100 people, 35 of them have responded. And I go, well, that's not a bad ratio, 35 responses from 100 outreaches. Yeah, but none of those 35 have transitioned into clients. Okay, well, that would suggest to me that your offer is either unclear, complex, or unpalatable. Because if people are leaning into conversation, but they're still not converting to clients, then there's something wrong with the bottom end of the funnel. By the same virtue, I speak to people who say, I write content 3 to 5 days a week, but the only people that ever respond are people just like me, my peer group. And, immediately without looking, I can normally take an educated guess and say, well, actually your language that you're using is not about your ideal customer. You're not writing content for your ideal customer. You're writing it for yourself. Hey, look at me. This is what I do, and I'm really good at this. It's a very natural thing to do, but it doesn't win business. And so there is an explicit order of events that if you get it right, you can bring a fractional business to market in 7 or 8 weeks and actually hit the ground running. And if, to your point, Paul, if serendipity plays a part as well and you happen to land a client early, then great. You've already done all the legwork to now go into that sort of business development mode where you just continue the effort while servicing a client to scale the business up. So you actually get the option to scale up far more quickly. I guess to close that point down, if you get that the wrong way round, this is what happens. And I see it more times than I care to mention. People come into the fractional market either because somebody said, hey, this person over here wants somebody that can do this and you look like a good fit, or they land in the fractional market and they land a client through a referral straight away. They advertise, they make that announcement to their network, this is what I'm doing, and somebody in the network goes, hey, here's a referral. While they're in that client, they then start trying to reverse engineer what business development looks like in completely the wrong order. And it's a panic because you're running up against the end of a contract. When that happens, you've got nothing. You've got a cliff. So please, get it done early, get it done in the right order. And if you're just not certain, then find a coach.
And I guess that kind of goes nicely into the final segment of today's chat. If you get all those foundational bits right, you're going to start seeing demand and you're going to convert a higher proportion of prospects into clients. There comes a point, though, where you've got too much demand. What happens when you get that nice problem to have where you've probably got some, you've got clients that are paying you well, you've got that work-life balance, you've got more clients that you think you want to take on, and you think, actually, I'll take on that client because that client's more advisory, I'm not going to be doing much delivery work for them, so I'll take them on anyway. So you take them on. All of a sudden, you've got 5 or 6, 7 clients that, and again, serendipity, they might all have a problem at the same time. It kills your time. So you've built the pipeline, you've got the clients, you're overburdened with work. How do you prevent that happening? Because you might want to turn the volume down on some clients, but you can't because you're in the middle of project delivery. You're guessing that some clients, they'll only need my advice next month, not right now. So how do you balance that? How do you know when you've got enough clients?
Start at the beginning. Every single person I speak to about coming into fractional consulting, I ask the same question. What are your income requirements? What do you need in order to get by? That's question 1. Question 2 is, what do you want? How big do you want this to be? Now, unless you've got a clear understanding of those two things, I mean, first and foremost, if you don't know how much money you need to get by, then sorry, take a look at yourself. You must know what your burn rate is on a month to month basis. What's your bills plus your lifestyle. What's your healthy place. If you then look at the other end of the scale, how big do you want this to be? Then you've got a mechanism to understand how much client work you need to take on in order to generate that. Now, if you get the best problem in the world, which is the demand rapidly increases and therefore you're flying through those boundaries, that's great. But there is a huge risk. And the huge risk is that if you overcommit, if you overstretch yourself, then the quality of your service will naturally decline. And it's not because you're lazy or you're negligent, just because you're busy. And trust me, when you're working with 5-6 clients in parallel, it's really easy for things to slip through the gaps. It's really easy for you to glance at an email and go, I'll get to that in a minute, and then completely forget, and 9 hours passes. So my advice is to keep an eye on your capacity in the totality of capacity. If you said originally that you wanted to be working 50% of the time to allow 20% slack, 30% biz dev, and you're now finding that you're working 70% of the time, what slipped? Did you just lose your free time slack, or have you stopped your business development? Adjust accordingly. In terms of strategies to manage that, well, there are 2 or 3 ways that I would look to do it. In the first instance, if you're seeing a massive spike in demand, chances are you're undervaluing your services. Just saying. There's another way of skinning that cat, which is increase the base price of your services. Yes, your demand will decrease very, very slightly because you'll price people out of your market, but your revenue generation will actually increase. So you get more for doing the same amount of work. If, however, you do that and you're still seeing an increased level of demand, you're still getting people kicking your door down looking for work, then it's probably time to start thinking about strategic partnerships. Because I talk to people a lot about how do you diversifying income. If you just want to work and earn money, that's fine. That's called being employed. If you want to run a business that is truly scalable financially, gets rid of those peaks and troughs and actually generates you the lifestyle that you want, then you probably want to think about how you scale that up and how you generate multiple income streams. And the obvious one in that context is, well, actually act as an introducer. Get yourself a trusted network of people just like you that do what you do, and farm out to those people the stuff that you don't have the capacity to do. You've done the legwork, you've built the relationships, you've built the trust. You are a trusted advisor, so you can now farm out some of that work to other people and maybe even take a commission off the side of that for introducing the work to them. And at which point, there's your secondary revenue stream that's earning you money just for the business development work that you're doing and the network that you've created. It's not costing you time in the day in terms of managing the client and running the client day to day.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. And people coming into this fractional world, scaling your client base, it could be just fewer clients paying you more revenue. So would you rather have 4 clients paying you $3,000 a month or two clients paying you $6,000 a month? It's
I had
I'd go for.
I had a mentor probably 7 years ago. Yeah, it would have been about 7 years ago. He said to me, if you're charging your client £5,000 a month and they're not complaining and everything's happy, then you should seek to raise that by 20% year on year until they start to question the value. That's it. And I did that religiously, 20% year on year, standard uptick in cost. I can count the clients on one hand that questioned it or complained about it. And they weren't great clients. They weren't my top drawer clients. My top drawer clients never had a problem with it, always saw the value in what I was delivering and were quite happy to pay for it. And that just meant that I was able to, I guess for me, earn the money that I needed and wanted to earn and not burn myself by lowering the quality of the proposition.
And that's probably a good point to close the show. If you've been listening or watching this episode, I hope you found some value in the discussion, and you can take what you've learnt into the next part of your fractional career. In our next episode, I'll be joined again by Dan, and we'll be discussing the thorny subject of mastering the fractional transition. So we'll be looking at personal resilience and adaptation. Dan, thank you again. That's been a great show. Really enjoyed it and listening to your wisdom there. And I look forward to you joining us on the next episode.
Cheers, Paul. It's been a pleasure, and I will speak to you soon.